Captain Jake Harrison stood on the bridge of the USS Endeavour and watched the stars through the large window in front of him. 3 months had passed since Earth told all human ships to come home. 3 months since humanity left the Galactic Council. Jake still could not believe it had really happened. His ship was one of the last human vessels still flying in Council space. Earth had given him orders to finish his current mission and return home. No more helping alien species. No more fixing their problems. No more being the galaxy's problem solvers. Amy Foster sat at her station nearby. She was the ship's communications officer and had been getting messages all day. Her face looked tired and sad as she turned to Jake. "Captain, we have 17 new distress calls from different sectors," Amy said. Her voice was quiet. "The Murkash and the Rockthari are fighting again. The Veltar are asking for help with trade negotiations. The plant people on Kepler 442b say their crops are dying." Jake closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Every day brought more calls for help. Every day he had to ignore them. Earth's new policy was clear. Humans would no longer interfere in alien affairs. The galaxy had told them they were not needed. Now the galaxy could prove it. "Send them the standard message," Jake said. "Tell them to contact their local council representatives." Amy nodded and turned back to her station. Jake knew she hated sending those messages as much as he hated ordering them. They had spent years helping these species. Now they had to pretend they did not care. Far away on Nexus Prime, the main council station, Ambassador Zix was having the worst day of her long life. She was a Veltar, one of the crystal people. Her body looked like living glass that changed colors based on her emotions. Right now she was flashing bright red, which meant she was very angry. The trade meeting between the Murkash and the Rockthari had been going on for 6 hours. The Murkash were water creatures who looked like giant fish with arms and legs. They needed special tanks filled with salt water to breathe. The Rockthari were rock people made of living stone. They could not understand why anyone would need water to live. "Your demands are impossible," gurgled Murkash Ambassador Findar from inside his water tank. "How can we trade our deep-sea minerals when you offer us rocks from your dry planets? We have no use for such things." Ambassador Rocktel of the Rockthari made a sound like grinding stone. "Water creatures always complain. Your soft bodies make you weak. Trade with us or find other partners." Zix tried to calm them down, but her crystal body kept flashing red and orange. Before humans left, these meetings were easy. Human diplomats would find ways to help different species understand each other. They would suggest trades that worked for everyone. They would explain why each species needed certain things. Now Zix had to do it alone, and she was failing badly. The Veltar were good at many things, but they could not think like other species. They saw the world through crystal eyes and could not imagine what it was like to need water or to be made of stone. The meeting ended with both sides angry. Findar swam away in his mobile water tank. Rocktel stomped out, leaving small stone pieces on the floor. Zix sat alone in the empty room, her body now flashing blue, which meant she was sad. On the USS Endeavour, Lieutenant Amy Foster was reading through the day's messages. Each one made her heart hurt a little more. The stories were all the same: species that could not talk to each other anymore, trades that were falling apart, and conflicts that were getting worse. She found one message from a human scientist named Dr. Lisa Chang. Lisa worked on Outpost 7, a research station on the edge of Council space. The message was marked as personal, so Amy decided to read it. "Amy, I hope this reaches you," the message began. "Things are getting bad out here. I'm studying how different alien species are reacting to human withdrawal. The results are scary. Many species seem to be having mental breakdowns without human support. They do not know how to solve problems on their own anymore." Amy felt a cold chill run down her back. She had been so busy feeling sad about leaving that she had not thought about what their departure might do to the aliens they left behind. Back on Nexus Prime, Supreme Chancellor Crixtal was holding an emergency meeting with her top advisors. Crixtal was a Hyvenal, one of the insect people. She looked like a giant ant that walked on 2 legs and had 4 arms. Her kind were very smart and very proud. The humans think they can force us to beg for their return, Crixtal said to her advisors. Her voice made a buzzing sound when she talked. They are wrong. The galaxy was here for millions of years before humans arrived. We will be fine without them. Her chief advisor, a smaller hive null named Buzzak, moved his antennae nervously. Supreme Chancellor, the reports from the outer sectors are not good. Trade is down 40%. 3 mining operations have shut down. The Xandra are starting to attack their neighbors again. Crixtal waved one of her 4 arms dismissively. Growing pains. The galaxy is adjusting to life without human interference. Things will improve soon. But deep inside, Crixtal was starting to worry. She had been reading old historical records and she was finding a disturbing pattern. Every major crisis in the past 300 years had been solved with human help. Every successful trade agreement had human mediators. Every peace treaty had human witnesses. She told herself it was just coincidence. The hive nulls were logical creatures. They did not believe in things they could not prove. But the evidence was starting to pile up, and it all pointed to the same conclusion. Humans were more important to galactic civilization than anyone wanted to admit. On the USS Endeavour, Captain Jake Harrison made his final log entry for the day. Captain's log, day 93 since withdrawal. We continued to receive distress calls from across the galaxy. Following Earth's orders, we are not responding to requests for assistance. Morale among the crew remains low. We all became explorers and diplomats because we wanted to help people. Now we are told that helping is wrong. Jake paused and looked out at the stars again. I understand why Earth made this decision. The Council never treated us as equals. They saw us as useful servants, not as partners. But watching the galaxy tear itself apart is harder than I expected. I just hope Earth knows what it is doing. As Jake finished his log, Amy Foster brought him one more message. This one was different from the others. It came directly from Supreme Chancellor Crixtal herself. Captain Harrison, the message said, I know your government has ordered you to ignore our communications, but I must ask, how many more species must suffer before humans realize they are making a mistake? The galaxy needs you. We always have. Jake deleted the message without responding. But Crixtal's words stayed in his mind long after the stars carried his ship toward home. 6 months had passed since the last human ship left Council space. Commander Ryan Brooks flew his stealth vessel through the shadows between stars, watching a civilization slowly fall apart. His ship, the USS Shadow, was designed to be invisible to alien sensors. Earth wanted to know what was happening in the galaxy, but they did not want anyone to know humans were still watching. Ryan floated near his observation window and watched the Andorian mining station break apart. The station had been a joint project between 5 different species. For 20 years they had worked together to mine rare metals from the asteroids around them. Human engineers had designed the station. Human managers had coordinated the work schedules. Human diplomats had settled arguments between the different species. Now the station was dying. The Veltar crystal people had stopped working with the Merkash fish people. The Rockthari rock people could not understand why the plantoid tree people needed special air to breathe. Without humans to explain these differences and find solutions, the partnership had collapsed in just 4 months. Commander, called Sergeant Bill Turner from the communication station, I am picking up an emergency broadcast from Kepler 442b. Ryan moved to look at the screen. Kepler 442b was an agricultural world where the plantoids grew food for 12 different star systems. The plantoids looked like walking trees with faces. They were peaceful and kind, but they were not very smart about technology. The face on the screen belonged to Elder Grootvan, the leader of the plantoid farmers. His bark-like skin was turning gray, which meant he was very sick or very scared. Please, anyone who can hear this message, Grootvan said in his slow, deep voice. Our crops are failing. The seeds that human scientists gave us are not growing anymore. We do not understand the human technology. Our people are starting to starve. We need help. Ryan felt his stomach twist with guilt. He knew exactly what was wrong. Human agricultural scientists had created special crops that could grow in different types of soil. But the plants needed regular treatment with human-made chemicals. Without those treatments, the plants would die within 6 months. "Sir," said Turner, "should we respond to their distress call?" "No," Ryan said quietly. "We have our orders." But orders did not make the guilt go away. Ryan had visited Kepler 442b many times. He had friends among the plantoids, good people who had never hurt anyone. Now they were going to starve because humans had decided to teach the galaxy a lesson. On the other side of the galaxy, the warrior species called the Xandra were having the time of their lives. The Xandra looked like giant lizards that walked on 2 legs and carried big weapons. They loved to fight and conquer other worlds. For the past 50 years, human peacekeepers had kept the Xandra under control. Whenever they tried to attack, their neighbors' human ships would show up. The humans never used violence. They just talked to the Xandra leaders and convinced them to find other ways to prove their strength. Sometimes they organized sports competitions. Sometimes they offered mining rights on empty planets. The Xandra respected humans because humans were not afraid of them. Now the humans were gone, and War Chief Skarax was ready to build an empire. His flagship, the Bone Crusher, led a fleet of 60 warships toward the peaceful Harmony system. The 3 planets in that system were home to artists, musicians, and philosophers. They had no weapons and no armies. "My warriors," Skarax roared to his crew. "For too long the soft humans have kept us from our destiny. Now nothing stands between us and glory. We will take these worlds and make them ours. We will show the galaxy that the Xandra are the strongest species in the universe." The attack on the Harmony system took only 3 hours. The peaceful inhabitants had no choice but to surrender. Within a week, Skarax had conquered all 3 planets. His victory sent a message to every other Xandra clan. The time for expansion had come. Back on Nexus Prime, Ambassador Zix was trying to organize a response to the Xandra attacks. But the emergency session of the Council was not going well. Representatives from 40 different species sat in a huge circular chamber, all talking at the same time. The problem was communication. Humans had always provided translation services for council meetings. But human translators did more than just convert words from one language to another. They understood the cultural meanings behind those words. They knew when a species was being polite versus when they were being serious. They could tell when someone was scared or angry or confused. Without human translators, everything was getting lost in translation. The hibernal insect people communicated partly through scent chemicals. The ethereal energy beings spoke through electromagnetic waves. The Harmony survivors who had escaped the Xandra attack spoke through musical tones. Electronic translators could convert the words, but they missed all the emotional and cultural content. When the Harmony representative sang a song about their pain, the translator just said, "We are experiencing negative emotions." When the hibernal ambassador released alarm pheromones, the translator said nothing because there were no words to convert. Zix tried her best to keep the meeting focused, but her crystal body kept flashing different colors as she grew more frustrated. The Veltar showed emotions through color changes, but most species could not read those colors correctly without human help. "We must take action against the Xandra," she said, her body flashing bright orange. "They have violated the peace accords." But the Rockthari representative, a stone creature named Boulderek, made grinding sounds that the translator converted to, "Military action is expensive and difficult." The Merkash delegate, swimming in his portable water tank, gurgled something that came out as water dwellers prefer diplomatic solutions. After 6 hours of confused arguments, the meeting ended with no decisions made. The Xandra were free to continue their conquests. Dr. Lisa Chang sat in her small office on Outpost 7 and reviewed her research notes. For the past 6 months, she had been studying how different alien species were coping with human withdrawal. The results were worse than she had expected. Lisa had discovered that many species had become psychologically dependent on human support. The Veltar crystal people had stopped making important decisions because they used to ask human advisors for help. The plantoids had forgotten how to solve technical problems because human engineers always fixed things for them. Even the proud, Hyvenals were struggling because they had relied on human negotiators to talk to other species. But the worst cases were the individual aliens who had worked closely with humans. Lisa had interviewed dozens of them, and many were showing signs of severe depression. They felt lost and abandoned. Some had stopped eating. Others could not sleep. A Veltar trader named Crystalzen had worked with human merchants for 15 years. Humans taught me how to understand what other species really wanted, he told Lisa. Now I cannot read their emotions anymore. Every trade negotiation fails. I do not know how to do business without human partners. A plantoid scientist named Branchara had similar problems. Human researchers showed me how to ask the right questions, she said. They helped me think about problems in new ways. Without them, I feel like my mind has stopped working. Lisa realized that humans had been doing more than just helping alien species solve problems. They had been teaching aliens how to think differently, how to be creative, how to understand other points of view. Without that guidance, many species were reverting to old, narrow ways of thinking. Meanwhile, on Earth, President Helen Garcia was reading daily reports from the few human observers still in Council space. The reports painted a picture of accelerating collapse. Trade between species had dropped by 60%. 3 major alliance agreements had fallen apart. 17 species were now engaged in open conflicts. But the most disturbing report came from Dr. Chang on Outpost 7. Her psychological analysis suggested that many alien species had lost the ability to adapt and solve problems independently. They had become like children who could not function without their parents. Madam President, said her chief advisor, Senator John Mitchell, some people are saying we should end the withdrawal. The humanitarian cost is getting very high. President, Garcia looked out the window at the blue sky of Earth. Senator, humanity spent 300 years serving other species. We solved their problems, fought their wars, and negotiated their treaties. And how did they thank us? They treated us like servants. They acted like our help was something they deserved, not something they should be grateful for. She turned, back to Mitchell. The galaxy needs to learn that human assistance is not a right. It is a gift. Until they understand that, we stay home. But even as she spoke those words, Garcia felt the weight of billions of lives on her shoulders. She wondered if teaching the galaxy a lesson was worth watching it burn. In the depths of space, Commander Ryan Brooks continued his secret mission. His stealth ship followed Xandra war fleets as they conquered system after system. He watched trade routes collapse as species could no longer work together. He documented the slow starvation of agricultural worlds that could not maintain their human-designed food systems. Each report he sent back to Earth was like a knife in his heart. He had joined the space service to explore the galaxy and make friends with alien species. 1 year had passed since humanity left the Galactic Council, and the galaxy was burning. Captain Tony Martinez stood on the bridge of the hospital ship USS Mercy, watching a scene that broke his heart. Hundreds of refugee ships filled the space around his vessel, each one carrying survivors from worlds that had been destroyed by war, famine, or simple neglect. The USS Mercy was positioned just outside Council space, following Earth's orders to stay away from alien territories. But Tony could not ignore the suffering he saw every day. His ship was designed to help injured people from any species, but now he could only watch as alien refugees died, because he was forbidden to enter Council space to help them. Captain, called Dr. Nancy Kim from the medical bay, we have refugee ships from 7 different species requesting permission to dock. They have wounded and sick people who need immediate care. Tony looked at the sea of ships in front of him. Each species had different needs. The Merkash needed saltwater environments. The ethereal beings required special energy fields. The plantoids needed specific types of air to breathe. The Veltar could only survive in certain light conditions. A year ago, human medical stations throughout the galaxy would have automatically accommodated all these different requirements. Human doctors understood the biology of dozens of species. Human engineers knew how to create the right environments for everyone. Human coordinators could manage the complex logistics of treating multiple species at the same time. Now Tony's ship was one of the last human medical vessels in this part of the galaxy, and he was not allowed to use it. "Dr. Kim," Tony said, with sadness in his voice, "send them medical supplies and basic instructions. That is all we can do." Dr. Kim's face showed her frustration. "Captain, these people are dying from diseases we could easily cure. The plantoids have a fungal infection that we have medicine for. The Veltar are suffering from crystal fractures that our regeneration technology could fix in hours." "I know," Tony said quietly, "but our orders are clear. We provide humanitarian aid from outside council space only." What made the situation even worse was that many of the refugee crises were caused by problems that humans used to solve routinely. The plantoid refugees were fleeing their homeworld because their crops had failed. Human agricultural scientists could have fixed the problem in days. The Veltar refugees had been forced to leave their crystal cities because they could not repair damage from natural disasters. Human engineers had maintained their cities for decades. On Nexus Prime, the Council's main station, Supreme Chancellor Crystal was facing the worst crisis in her species' history. The emergency session she had called was supposed to address the growing chaos in the galaxy. But the meeting itself had become a perfect example of why the galaxy was falling apart. The Great Council Chamber held representatives from over 400 species, but they might as well have been speaking 400 different languages. Without human translators and mediators, communication had become almost impossible. Ambassador Zix of the Veltar was trying to explain the refugee crisis, but her crystal body's color changes meant nothing to most of the other species. The Hyvenal representatives were releasing chemical signals that only confused the air-breathing species. The ethereal beings communicated through electromagnetic pulses that interfered with electronic equipment. "We must coordinate our response to the refugee crisis," Zix said, her body flashing urgent red colors. But Torgak of the Xandra clan misunderstood the translation. "The crystal people want to coordinate attacks on refugee ships," he growled. Typical Veltar weakness disguised as strategy. "That is not what she said," protested Findar of the Merkash, but his gurgling voice through the water translator made him sound angry when he was actually trying to be helpful. The Bolderek of the Rokthari made grinding stone sounds that the translator converted poorly. "Rock people believe all soft species should stop existing." Within minutes, the emergency session had devolved into shouting matches between different species groups. Representatives started leaving the chamber. Some species began making threats against others. The meeting that was supposed to solve the galaxy's problems instead made them worse. Crystal watched her life's work crumble before her eyes. She had spent 50 years building the Council into a strong organization. She had believed that all species could work together as equals. But now she was learning a hard truth. Equality did not mean that all species were equally good at all things. After the meeting collapsed, Crystal went to her private office and began reading historical records. She had been avoiding this research for months, but she could no longer ignore the evidence. Every successful council project in the past 3 centuries had human involvement. Every major peace treaty had human witnesses. Every trade agreement that lasted more than 5 years had human mediators. The pattern was so clear that Crystal wondered how she had missed it before. Humans were not just helpful members of the council. They were the glue that held the entire organization together. But admitting this truth meant admitting that her species and all the other species were not as capable as they had believed. It meant acknowledging that humans were special in ways that other species were not. Meanwhile, in the outer rim of the galaxy, the ancient Athereal Conquered was making moves that terrified everyone who understood their power. The Athereals were beings of pure energy who had existed for millions of years. They usually ignored the affairs of younger species, but the chaos in the galaxy had attracted their attention. Commander Swiftwing of the Ethereal Scout Forces sent a message to all Council worlds. "The younger species have proven they cannot maintain order in this galaxy. The Ethereal Concord will resume direct control of disputed territories. Species that resist will be absorbed into our collective energy matrix." This message caused panic throughout Council space. The Ethereals had technology that was far beyond anything the younger species possessed. They could destroy entire star systems by manipulating stellar energy. They could convert matter into energy and energy into matter. When they said they would absorb resistant species, they meant it literally. But the Council could not organize a response because they could not even organize a meeting. Every attempt to coordinate the different species ended in confusion and arguments. Dr. Lisa Chang on Outpost 7 was documenting the psychological breakdown that was spreading through the alien populations. Her research had revealed something that scared her. Many species were not just struggling without human help, they were losing basic cognitive abilities. It is like watching children who have been raised by very capable parents, she wrote in her report to Earth. When the parents left, the children did not just miss the help, they forgot how to think for themselves. Many alien species have become so dependent on human problem-solving methods that they cannot adapt to new situations anymore. Her interviews with individual aliens showed the depth of the problem. A Veltar engineer named Sharplight had worked with humans for 20 years. Humans taught me to consider multiple solutions to every problem, he told Lisa. They showed me how to think about situations from different angles. Now I can only see problems in one way. My mind feels locked. A plantoid leader called Wiseroot had similar experiences. Human diplomats taught us to understand the motivations of other species. They showed us how to find compromise solutions that worked for everyone. Without that guidance, we can only think about what our own people need. We have forgotten how to cooperate. Lisa realized that humans had been teaching alien species more than just technical skills. They had been teaching them how to think flexibly, how to empathize with others, and how to adapt to changing situations. These were cognitive abilities that humans took for granted, but they were apparently rare in the galaxy. On Earth, President Garcia was reading Dr. Chang's reports with growing concern. The psychological dependency that Lisa described was worse than anyone had imagined. It suggested that the alien species might never recover their ability to function independently. Madam President, said Senator Mitchell during their daily briefing, the latest reports show that 17 star systems are now completely uninhabitable. The death toll from wars and famines has reached over 2 billion beings. Some of our advisors are suggesting that we have made our point and should consider returning to help. President Garcia stared at the casualty numbers on her screen. 2 billion deaths. The number was so large that her mind could barely process it. But she also thought about the 300 years that humans had spent serving ungrateful alien masters, the centuries of being treated as second-class citizens in their own galaxy. Senator, she said finally, if we return now, nothing will have changed. The aliens will go back to taking our help for granted. They will treat us like servants again. The only way to create real change is to let them understand what life is like without us. But even as she said the words, Garcia felt them stick in her throat. 2 billion deaths. How many more would die before the lesson was learned? In space, Captain Tony Martinez received a message that changed everything. It came from Supreme Chancellor Krixtal herself, broadcast on emergency frequencies to every human vessel in the galaxy. Humans of Earth, the message began. 18 months after humanity's departure from the Galactic Council, the galaxy was dying. Admiral Ben Carter sat in his comfortable office on Earth, reading reports from the few human observers still scattered throughout Council space. Each report painted a picture of civilization in complete collapse. The Athereal Concord had consumed 12 star systems, converting entire planets into pure energy. The Xandra Empire was fighting wars on 4 different fronts, their warrior fleets, burning worlds that had stood peacefully for thousands of years. Trade routes that had carried goods and culture between species for centuries now sat empty, their stations abandoned or destroyed. But Admiral Carter was not surprised by any of this. He had helped plan humanity's withdrawal from the very beginning. It had not been a punishment or an act of abandonment. It had been a carefully designed demonstration. Admiral, said Colonel Jane Roberts, his chief of staff, the latest casualty reports are in. We estimate over 8 billion alien deaths in the past 6 months alone. 8 billion. The number should have horrified Carter, but he had seen these projections months ago. The withdrawal planners had known exactly what would happen when humans left. They had studied the psychological profiles of every major species. They had analyzed the dependencies that had built up over 3 centuries of human involvement in galactic affairs. "Any word from the Council leadership?" Carter asked. "Supreme Chancellor Crix-Tal sends a message every day," Roberts replied, "each one more desperate than the last. Yesterday she offered to make humans the senior partners in the Council. Today she is offering to step down and let a human become Supreme Chancellor." Carter nodded grimly. The Council leaders were finally understanding the truth that humans had known for decades. Galactic civilization could not function without human involvement. But the lesson had come at a terrible price. On the research station Deep Space Nine, Dr. Kevin Moore was completing the most important study of his career. For the past year and a half, he had been analyzing the psychological and cognitive profiles of hundreds of alien species. His findings would change how humans understood their place in the galaxy forever. "Computer, display summary of cognitive flexibility analysis," Kevin said to his workstation. Charts and graphs appeared on his screen, showing the results of intelligence tests given to representatives from every known species. The results were shocking, even to Kevin, who had been expecting them. Human cognitive flexibility scores were off the charts compared to every other known species. While aliens excelled in specific areas, only humans showed high adaptability across all categories of thinking. Only humans could effectively switch between different types of problem-solving approaches. Only humans could understand and empathize with radically different forms of life. "Computer, display empathy quotient comparisons." More charts appeared. The results were even more dramatic. Humans scored nearly 10 times higher than the next most empathetic species. More importantly, humans were the only species that could empathize across biological boundaries. A human could understand the needs of a crystal being, a water creature, a plant person, and an energy being all at the same time. Kevin leaned back in his chair and stared at the data. It explained everything. Why human diplomats were so successful. Why alien species had become dependent on human mediation. Why the galaxy was falling apart without human involvement. Evolution had played a cruel joke on the galaxy. It had created hundreds of intelligent species, each one perfectly adapted to their own environment and way of life. But adaptation came with a cost. Specialization meant that each species could only understand the world from their own narrow perspective. Humans were different. Earth's chaotic environment had forced human evolution to favor adaptability over specialization. Humans had to deal with changing climates, diverse ecosystems, and constant challenges that required flexible thinking. The result was a species that was not the best at any one thing, but was uniquely good at understanding and working with others. The galaxy's other species had mistaken this flexibility for weakness. They thought humans were just average at everything. They did not understand that being average at everything was actually a superpower in a diverse galactic community. Captain Susan Davis commanded the reconnaissance ship USS Observer, one of the few human vessels still operating in what used to be Council space. Her mission was to document the collapse and gather intelligence for Earth's government. What she saw during her travels would haunt her for the rest of her life. Entire star systems lay abandoned, their populations fled or dead. The great trading stations that had been centers of galactic commerce for millennia now drifted empty through space. On world after world, she found the ruins of civilizations that had thrived for thousands of years until humans left. The planet Harmony VII had been home to 50 million artists, musicians, and philosophers. It was now a graveyard. The Xandra had destroyed every city and killed every inhabitant. The beautiful crystal structures that the Veltar had built over centuries lay shattered. The floating gardens where the plantoids had created living symphonies of color and scent were burned. "Tash, Captain," said her navigation officer, Lieutenant Mark Taylor. "We are receiving a distress signal from the research station on Kepler 442b. Susan knew that station well. It had been built by humans and aliens working together to study sustainable agriculture. Dr. Branchara, a plantoid scientist, had been doing important work there with human researchers. "Put the signal through," Susan ordered. Dr. Branchara's image appeared on the screen, but Susan barely recognized her. The plantoid scientist had always been vibrant and green, like a healthy tree. Now her bark was gray and cracked. Her leaves were brown and falling off. "Please," Branchara whispered. "If any humans can hear this message, we need help. My research station has been attacked by desperate refugees from 6 different species. They want our food supplies, but we do not have enough for everyone. I tried to negotiate with them, but I cannot understand their needs anymore. Without human mediators, I cannot find a solution that works for everyone. People are dying, and I do not know how to save them." The transmission ended with static. Susan stared at the empty screen, feeling sick. Branchara had been one of the smartest and most capable aliens she had ever met. If someone like her could not cope without human help, what hope did the rest of the galaxy have? On a secret asteroid base in the Outer Rim, 5 alien ambassadors held a meeting that would have been impossible just 2 years earlier. Ambassador Velnash of the Veltar, Findar of the Merkash, Boldarek of the Rukthari, Wiseroot of the Plantoids, and Buzak of the Hivenals had come together in desperation. These 5 species had been enemies or rivals for centuries. Their biological differences made communication and cooperation nearly impossible, but facing total extinction had forced them to try. "We must face the truth," said Velnash, her crystal body flashing dim blue colors of sadness. "Our species cannot survive without human assistance. We have tried for 18 months to prove our independence. Instead, we have proven our complete dependence." Findar gurgled agreement from his water tank. "The fish people have lost 60% of our population to wars and famines. Our trading fleets cannot navigate the old routes without human coordinators. Our diplomats cannot negotiate with other species without human translators." Boldarek made grinding sounds that the primitive translator converted roughly. "Stone people acknowledge that soft humans possess unique abilities that hard people lack." Wiseroot's branches swayed sadly. "The plant people have forgotten how to think creatively. Human scientists taught us to ask new questions and find new solutions. Without their guidance, our minds have become like soil without water. Nothing grows." Buzak's antennae twitched nervously. "The insect people are logical. We must admit logical conclusions. Human cognitive abilities are necessary for galactic civilization. We cannot replicate these abilities ourselves." The 5 ambassadors sat in silence for several minutes, each one struggling with the implications of what they were admitting. Their species were not just dependent on humans for help with problems. They were dependent on humans for the ability to think beyond their own narrow perspectives. "What do we do now?" asked Velnash. "We beg," said Findar simply. "We admit that humans are not our servants or our tools. They are our teachers and our leaders. We ask them to come back not as helpers, but as guides." Back on Earth, President Garcia was reading the daily intelligence reports in her private office. The numbers were staggering. Over 300 star systems had been abandoned. 47 species were on the verge of extinction. The great galactic civilization that had taken millions of years to build was collapsing in less than 2 years. Her advisors were pushing harder each day for intervention. The humanitarian crisis was beyond anything in recorded history. But Garcia knew that returning too soon would mean returning to the old system where humans did all the work and got none of the credit. "Madam President," said her chief of staff, "we have received a joint message from over 200 surviving alien governments. They are formally requesting that humanity return to the galaxy not as members of the Council, but as its leaders." Garcia read the message carefully. It was not a request for help. 2 years after humanity left the Galactic Council, Earth received a transmission unlike anything in galactic history. Every surviving alien government, over 400 species, broadcast the same message at the same time. The signal was so powerful that it reached every human colony, every space station, and every ship in human space. President Helen Garcia stood in the Global Assembly Hall on Earth, watching representatives from every human nation gather to hear the message. The great chamber was silent as the transmission began to play. The image showed Supreme Chancellor Krikstal, but she looked nothing like the proud insect leader who had once dismissed human concerns. Her once shiny exoskeleton was cracked and dull. Her forearms shook as she spoke. "People of Earth," Crixtal said, "I speak for every surviving government in the galaxy. We have learned the truth that we were too proud to see before. Humanity is not just another species among many. You are the heart and mind of galactic civilization. Without you, we cannot think beyond our own narrow perspectives. Without you, we cannot work together. Without you, we die." The message continued, with something that had never happened before in galactic history. Representatives from dozens of species appeared on screen, each one speaking the same words in their own language. "We formally invite humanity to return not as members of our council, but as its leaders. We acknowledge that humans possess unique gifts that are essential to our survival. We pledge to follow human guidance in rebuilding our broken civilization." When the transmission ended, the assembly hall remained silent for several minutes. President Garcia looked out at the faces of humanity's leaders. Some looked shocked, others looked scared, a few looked proud. All of them understood that this moment would change human history forever. Senator Paul Wright was the first to speak. He was an older man who had always opposed human involvement in alien affairs. "Madam President, this message proves that our withdrawal was the right decision. The aliens have finally admitted that they need us. But that does not mean we should go back. We tried helping them for 3 centuries, and they treated us like servants. Why should we risk human lives to save species that never respected us?" "Senator," Mary Johnson stood up to respond. She was younger and had always believed in galactic cooperation. "Senator Wright, with respect, we are talking about the extinction of entire civilizations. Billions of innocent beings are dying because we chose to teach them a lesson. Yes, they treated us poorly in the past, but now they are offering us true partnership. How can we ignore their suffering?" The debate that followed was the most intense in Earth's political history. For 3 days, representatives argued about humanity's responsibility to the galaxy. Some wanted to stay isolated and let the aliens solve their own problems. Others wanted to return immediately to stop the humanitarian crisis. But the decision ultimately came down to a global referendum. Every human being over the age of 16 would vote on whether humanity should return to the galaxy. The campaign that followed divided families, friendships, and entire communities. Dr. Alan Foster led the campaign to return. He was the grandson of Amy Foster, the communications officer who had served on the USS Endeavour during the early days of the withdrawal. Alan had studied the psychological reports from Dr. Chang and Dr. Moore. He understood that the alien species had lost the ability to think flexibly and adapt to changing situations. "My fellow humans," Alan said during his speeches, "we have a choice. We can stay home and be safe while entire civilizations die. Or we can accept the burden that evolution has placed on our shoulders. We are the only species in the galaxy that can understand and work with all other forms of life. That makes us responsible for their survival." The opposition was led by Senator Paul Wright, who argued for permanent isolation. "The aliens had millions of years to develop these abilities on their own," he said. "If they could not do it without human help, then they do not deserve to survive. Humanity owes the galaxy nothing." The debate revealed uncomfortable truths about human nature. The withdrawal had shown that humanity was uniquely important to galactic civilization, but it had also shown that other species had become completely dependent on human guidance. Returning to the galaxy would mean accepting responsibility for the survival and development of hundreds of different species. As the vote approached, more reports arrived from the collapsing galaxy. The Athereal Concord had begun converting entire solar systems into energy, destroying billions of years of natural evolution. The Xandra had wiped out 17 peaceful species in their quest for conquest. 43 species were down to their last few thousand individuals. Captain Jake Harrison, now promoted to admiral, waited with his fleet at the edge of human space. If the vote was yes, he would lead humanity's return to the galaxy. If it was no, he would help evacuate the last human observers from Council space. The USS Endeavour had been joined by over 2,000 human ships. Medical vessels like the USS Mercy under Captain Tony Martinez. Engineering ships to repair the damaged infrastructure of alien worlds. Diplomatic vessels to help species relearn how to work together. And military ships to stop the wars that were destroying entire star systems. But Jake knew that ships and technology would not be enough. The real work would be done by human teachers, counselors, and mediators who would help alien species redevelop their lost cognitive abilities. It would take generations to repair the psychological damage that had been done. The vote was closer than anyone expected. 53% of humanity voted to return to the galaxy. 47% voted to stay isolated. The margin was narrow, but it was enough. President Garcia announced the result to the world. Humanity will return to the galaxy, but we return on our own terms. We will not be servants or junior partners. We will be teachers and leaders, helping other species learn to think and work together. This is not a rescue mission. This is the beginning of a new chapter in galactic history. Admiral Harrison received the order to depart within hours of the vote. His fleet began the journey to Nexus Prime, the Council's main station. The trip would take 2 weeks, and Jake used that time to prepare his crews for what they would find. The reports from the advanced scouts were horrifying. Nexus Prime was barely functioning. Most of its systems had broken down without human maintenance. The Great Council chambers were empty because most species could no longer communicate effectively with each other. The few alien representatives who remained were barely surviving on emergency rations. When Harrison's fleet arrived at Nexus Prime, they found Supreme Chancellor Crystal waiting for them with the few surviving council members. The once proud insect leader looked tiny and fragile compared to the humans who came to greet her. "Admiral Harrison," Crystal said, her voice barely a whisper. "Welcome home." Jake was struck by her words. Home. For 3 centuries, humans had thought of Earth as home and the galaxy as a place they visited to help others. But Crystal was right. The galaxy was humanity's home now. Not just a place they helped, but a place they belonged. The ceremony that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. Instead of humans joining an existing council, the surviving alien species formally dissolved their old government and asked humans to create a new one. The new galactic charter established human colonies on key worlds throughout the galaxy. Human schools would teach alien children how to think flexibly and work with other species. Human mediators would have final authority in all interspecies disputes. But the charter also established something new, a mentorship system where each alien species would be paired with human advisors who would help them redevelop their lost cognitive abilities. The goal was not permanent dependence, but eventual independence through human-guided learning. Dr. Lisa Chang was appointed as the first director of interspecies psychology. Her job was to help alien species overcome the psychological damage caused by their dependence on human support. It would be the most important job in the galaxy. Admiral Harrison was offered the position of Supreme Chancellor, making him the leader of the entire galactic government. But he declined, suggesting instead that the position rotate between human and alien leaders every 5 years. The galaxy needed to learn to govern itself, but with human guidance. As the signing ceremony ended, Jake stood at the observation deck of Nexus Prime and looked out at the stars. The galaxy was broken, but it could be repaired. Species were dying, but they could be saved. Civilizations had collapsed, but they could be rebuilt. But the price of return was higher than anyone had imagined. Humanity could never again be just another species among many. They had become the guardians of galactic civilization, responsible for the survival and development of hundreds of different forms of life. Some humans would resent this burden, others would embrace it, but all of them would have to live with the knowledge that the galaxy could not survive without them. Evolution had made humanity unique, and that uniqueness came with responsibilities that would last forever. The stars looked different now to Jake. They were no longer distant points of light to be explored. They were homes to be protected, minds to be taught, and civilizations to be guided. Humanity had left the galaxy as servants and returned as teachers.